The video appeared without warning, without context, without mercy. It spread like wildfire across screens, phones, conversations, whispers, faster than truth could ever catch up. And by the time Tử Tiên saw it, it was already too late, already everywhere, already shaping a story that no longer belonged to her. Her fingers trembled as she stared at the screen. It was that night, that moment. A fragment of the past she had tried so hard to bury, now torn out of time and thrown into the harsh, unforgiving light of the present, edited just enough to look real, just enough to look damning, just enough to make people believe the worst. And they did, because people always do. Is that her? I knew something was off about her. So she trapped Jack like this? The comments blurred together, each one sharper than the last, cutting deeper with every second. And even though the video said nothing directly, even though it proved nothing clearly, the way it was framed, the way it was shared, the way it was talked about, turned her into the villain of a story she didn't even recognize anymore. Tử Tiên? Jack's voice came from behind her. She didn't turn. Couldn't. He stepped closer, saw the screen, and everything in him froze. What is this? He muttered, his expression darkening as he grabbed the phone, scrolling quickly, his jaw tightening with every comment, every accusation, every distorted version of the truth. This is manipulated, he said immediately. This isn't what happened. But the world didn't care, because the world wasn't looking for truth. It was looking for something to judge. Within hours, the video reached news pages, gossip accounts, online forums, turning into headlines that twisted everything further. The truth about Jack's relationship exposed. Who is Tử Tiên really? From village girl to scandal queen. Each title hit like a blow. Each word stripped her of something. Jack slammed his phone down onto the table, anger burning through him like fire. I'm going to shut this down, he said. I'll contact my lawyers. I'll find out who did this. Stop. Her voice was quiet, but it stopped him. He looked at her, and for the first time, he saw it. Not just fear, but something deeper, something breaking. It's already out there, she said slowly. You can't stop people from thinking what they want. I can try, he insisted. But at what cost? She asked, finally turning to face him. Her eyes were red, not just from tears, from exhaustion. I don't want this fight, she continued. I don't want to be looked at like this. Jack stepped closer. You're not alone in this. But she didn't move, because somehow, that didn't feel true anymore. The next day was worse, because the online world didn't stay online. It followed her, into the street, into every glance, into every silence. When she stepped outside, she felt it immediately, the shift in the air, the way conversations stopped just slightly too late, the way people looked at her just a little too long, just enough for her to know they recognized her. And they did. Two women standing near a cafe whispered as she passed. That's her. She looks so innocent. Exactly. The words weren't loud, but they didn't need to be. They were meant to be heard. Tử Tiên kept walking, faster, her chest tightening, her breath shallow, her thoughts spiraling as every step felt heavier than the last, until finally she reached home, closed the door behind her, and leaned against it as if the world outside might break through if she didn't hold it shut. Her phone buzzed, again and again. Messages, notifications, mentions. She didn't open them. She couldn't. Across the city, Jack was already moving, calling, demanding, fighting. This is defamation, he told his legal team, his voice cold with controlled fury. I want it taken down. I want whoever did this found. We're working on it, one of them replied. But the damage, it's already spreading. Jack clenched his fists. I don't care. Fix it. But deep down, he knew. Some things couldn't be undone. That night, when he came home, the apartment felt different, quieter. He found her sitting by the window, staring at nothing. Tien, he said softly. She didn't respond immediately. Then, slowly, was it always going to be like this? The question caught him off guard. What do you mean? Us, she said. being together. Was it always going to come with this? He hesitated, and that hesitation was enough. I didn't know, he admitted. She nodded, as if she expected that. I thought, if we just lived quietly, things would be simple, she said. But it's never simple with you, is it? The words weren't cruel, but they hurt. I'm trying to protect you, he said. I know, she replied. And that was the problem, because even his protection couldn't shield her from everything. Days passed, but nothing calmed down. If anything, it got worse. More clips appeared, more rumors, more speculation. And no matter how many statements Jack released, no matter how many facts were clarified, the narrative had already been decided. And in that narrative, Tử Tiên was guilty. Not because of truth, but because she was the easiest to blame. She stopped going out, stopped answering calls, stopped looking at herself in the mirror for too long, because the person staring back didn't feel like her anymore. And somewhere in the middle of it all, a thought began to grow. Small, dangerous. What if coming back was a mistake? Meanwhile, in a quiet room across the city, Jack's mother sat alone, her phone in her hand, the same video playing again and again, her expression unreadable, her mind caught between two worlds, the family name she had protected her whole life, and the girl who once sat beside her hospital bed, holding her hand when no one else did. A choice was forming, slowly, heavily, and she knew, whatever she decided next would change everything. The silence inside the apartment grew heavier with each passing day, not because there was no sound, but because everything that once felt normal had been replaced by something fragile, something uncertain, something that could break at any moment. And Tử Tiên felt it in every breath she took, in every step she made, in every reflection she avoided. She stopped opening the curtains, stopped answering messages, stopped asking Jack how his day was, because none of it mattered anymore when the world had already decided who she was. Outside, the noise hadn't faded. It had evolved, from whispers to headlines, from curiosity to cruelty. A new article surfaced that morning. Why is Jack still defending her? And below it, a blurred image of Tử Tiên from that night. She didn't need to read the rest. She already knew what it would say. Across the room, Jack was pacing, his phone pressed tightly against his ear, his voice sharp, controlled, but barely containing the anger beneath. I don't care how much it costs, he said. I want every copy taken down, every account traced, every person involved. He stopped when he noticed her watching him. For a second, something softened in his expression. Then the call ended. I'm handling it, he said, walking toward her. This is going to stop. But Tử Tiên didn't answer. She just looked at him. And in that look, there was something different. Not anger, not sadness, distance. You can't stop people from thinking, she said quietly. I can change what they see, he replied. And what they feel? She asked. He didn't answer, because he couldn't. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. A press request arrived. Not just any request. A live interview. Jack's name was at the center, and Tử Tien's image was already attached. They want you both to appear, his assistant explained. If we control the narrative, this could turn things around. Jack didn't hesitate. We'll do it. But when he told her, she stepped back. No. The word was immediate, firm, final. Tien, I won't stand there and explain my life to people who already hate me, she said, her voice shaking slightly, but her resolve clear. I won't turn myself into something they can dissect. This is the only way to protect you, Jack insisted. Or the only way to protect your image? She replied. The question hit harder than anything else, because somewhere inside, it wasn't entirely wrong. I'm doing this for us, he said again, but this time the words sounded weaker. Tử Tiên shook her head slowly. No. You're doing this because you don't know any other way. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. And for the first time, Jack had nothing to say. That night, she couldn't stay inside anymore. The walls felt too close, too suffocating. She stepped out quietly, pulling her coat tighter around her, walking without direction, without destination, just needing air, needing space, needing something that felt real. But the city didn't give her that. It only gave her more of what she was trying to escape. Two girls standing near a streetlight glanced at her, then whispered, then laughed. Her steps slowed, then stopped. "Hey, isn't that her?" one of them said, not even trying to hide it. Tử Tiên turned slightly, and for a moment, she almost spoke, almost defended herself, almost said something, but the words never came, because suddenly, she realized something. No matter what she said, it wouldn't matter. She turned away and kept walking until she couldn't anymore, until her legs gave in and she found herself sitting on a quiet bench, far from the noise, far from the lights, her hands shaking, her thoughts unraveling completely. "I can't do this," she whispered to herself, and for the first time, she meant it. Back at the apartment, Jack noticed she was gone. The moment he saw the empty room, something inside him dropped. He called her. No answer. Again. Nothing. He grabbed his keys and ran. Because suddenly, all the anger, all the strategy, all the control didn't matter. Only one thing did. Finding her. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Jack's mother sat alone in her living room, the television muted but still displaying Tử Tien's image, her face frozen in a frame that told a story that wasn't true, and for a long time, she had watched in silence, letting the world speak, letting the noise build, letting the judgment settle. But tonight, something shifted. She picked up her phone and made a call. "I want to arrange a statement," she said calmly. On the other end, there was a pause. "A statement about what, ma'am?" She looked at the screen one last time. At Tử Tiên. Not as the world saw her, but as she remembered her. "I will speak publicly," she said, "about my daughter-in-law." The words felt unfamiliar, but right. Because for the first time, she had made her choice. Not for reputation, not for society, but for truth. And maybe for redemption. At that same moment, Jack found her, sitting alone, small against the vastness of the night. "Tien." She didn't look up immediately. "I'm tired," she said softly. He walked closer, carefully, like approaching something fragile. "Then let me carry this with you," he said. She shook her head. "You can't carry something that isn't yours," she replied. "And what if it is?" he asked. She finally looked at him, and this time, there were no tears, only clarity. "I chose to come back," she said. "I chose this life again, with you." He listened, every word hitting deeper than the last. "But I didn't choose to lose myself in it." The air between them stilled. "I don't know who I am anymore in your world," she continued, "and maybe I need to find that out." Jack's chest tightened. "And where does that leave us?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer immediately, because she didn't know. "I don't want to hate this life," she said, "but I don't want to disappear in it either." A long silence followed. Then, "I'm not leaving you," she added softly. His breath caught. "But I can't stay like this." Hope and fear at the same time. "I need space," she said. Not distance, not goodbye, but something just as uncertain. Jack closed his eyes for a moment, then nodded. Because this time, he understood. Not everything could be fixed by holding on tighter. Sometimes, it meant learning how to let go, without losing. Behind them, the city lights continued to flicker, unchanged, unforgiving. But somewhere within that chaos, a different path was beginning to form, not clear, not easy, but real. And for Tử Tiên, that was where her story truly began.